light of Kepler 442b's twin suns cast an ethereal glow across the crystalline spires of New Geneva, humanity's first successful colony beyond the Sol system. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic tower, her hands pressed against the cool, transparent steel as she watched the alien vessel maintain its perfect orbit above their world. For 3 weeks now, the Zephyrian ship had remained there, a graceful, organic-looking craft that resembled a massive nautilus shell carved from living pearl, its surface shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in what their xenolinguist teams had determined was a form of complex communication. The first contact had been everything humanity had dreamed it would be. No invasion fleets, no death rays, no demands for surrender. Instead, the Zephyrians had transmitted mathematical sequences, followed by star charts, and then, miraculously, a translation matrix that allowed basic communication within days. They were explorers, much like humanity, seeking knowledge and peaceful exchange across the galaxy. Their emissary, who had introduced himself through the translation protocols as harmonizer Veltar, had expressed genuine fascination with human culture, particularly their music and artistic expressions. Elena remembered the moment of breakthrough when they had successfully established two-way communication. The aliens' first words, transmitted through their bioacoustic systems and translated by the AI matrices, had been hauntingly beautiful. We hear the songs of your world, the melodies of your hearts. We wish to learn the harmonies that make your species dance among the stars. It was poetry, not conquest, and it had brought tears to the eyes of hardened space marines and cynical politicians alike. The colony's governor, Marcus Chen, had been cautiously optimistic but thorough in his protocols. Every interaction was recorded, analyzed, and transmitted back to Earth via quantum entanglement communicators. The response from the United Earth government had been swift and clear. Proceed with extreme caution, but pursue peaceful relations. This was humanity's chance to prove they could be more than the violent territorial species their own history suggested. They could be diplomats, partners in a galactic community they had only dared to dream about. Dr. Sarah Kim, the lead xenobiologist, had been working around the clock to understand the Zephyrian physiology based on the scans they had been permitted to take. The aliens were remarkable. Bipedal beings that stood nearly 3 meters tall, with elongated limbs that seemed to flow like water when they moved. Their skin had a translucent quality that revealed a complex circulatory system filled with what appeared to be liquid light. Most fascinating were their cranial ridges, which housed what they called harmony organs, biological structures that could perceive and generate complex acoustic frequencies far beyond human capability. The cultural exchanges had been extraordinary. The Zephyrians had shared holographic recordings of their homeworld, Resonance Prime, where entire cities were grown rather than built, their architecture singing in the wind. Massive organic towers swayed in perfect synchronization, creating planet-wide symphonies that could be heard from orbit. In return, humanity had shared their music, their literature, their art. The aliens had been particularly entranced by human jazz, claiming that the improvisational nature resonated with their own cultural concept of fluid harmony, the belief that the most beautiful sounds came from spontaneous collaboration rather than rigid composition. But it was the personal connections that had truly moved both species toward friendship. Harmonizer Veltar had developed what could only be described as a friendship with Dr. Michael Torres, the colony's chief musician and cultural liaison. Through painstaking translation work, they had discovered that both species shared similar concepts of loss, hope, and the search for meaning in a vast universe. Veltar had even composed what he called a grief song, after learning about the human concept of mourning, a haunting melody that had left the entire diplomatic team in reverent silence. The Zephyrians had shared their own sorrows as well. Their species had evolved on a world where cooperation was essential for survival, but they had recently discovered the ruins of another civilization on their homeworld, evidence that they were not the first to achieve sentience on Resonance Prime. The previous species had apparently destroyed themselves in what the Zephyrians called the Silent War, leaving behind only empty cities and cautionary recordings. This discovery had driven them to seek out other intelligent life, hoping to form bonds that would prevent such tragedies from recurring. Elena smiled as she recalled yesterday's breakthrough. The Zephyrians had proposed a formal cultural exchange program. A small group of their people would remain on Kepler 442b to establish a permanent embassy, while a human delegation would travel to Resonance Prime. It was unprecedented, the first interstellar diplomatic mission in human history. The paperwork alone would keep bureaucrats busy for decades, but the implications were staggering. Humanity would no longer be alone in the universe. The preparations had been meticulous. The colonial government had converted an entire district of New Geneva into neutral territory, establishing what they called the Harmony Quarter. The Zephyrians had begun growing their embassy, a living structure that resembled a cross between a coral reef and a pipe organ, its biological walls already beginning to hum with subsonic frequencies that somehow made humans feel calm and welcome. In exchange, the humans had prepared their own embassy ship, the diplomatic vessel Melody, equipped with cultural archives, musical instruments, and carefully selected ambassadors who would represent the best of humanity to an alien world. Governor Chen had been particularly proud of the security arrangements. Unlike the paranoid scenarios imagined in countless science fiction stories, there had been no need for weapons or defensive systems. The Zephyrians had technology that could have easily overwhelmed the colony's defenses if they had hostile intentions, but instead they had voluntarily limited their scans of human technology and had even helped the colonists improve their atmospheric processors as a gesture of goodwill. The trust had been building daily. Zephyrian shuttles made regular trips to the surface, their crews working alongside human engineers to establish communication relays and cultural centers. The aliens had even begun learning human languages directly, their harmony organs allowing them to master the tonal complexities of Mandarin and the rhythmic patterns of Spanish with remarkable speed. Some of the younger colonists had started learning basic Zephyrian harmonic communication, though their limited vocal ranges meant they could only manage the simplest concepts. Elena's tablet chimed with an incoming message from the communication center. The daily briefing from the Zephyrian vessel was arriving, usually a mixture of cultural observations, technical data exchanges, and what had become known as harmony updates, the alien equivalent of social media posts. She was looking forward to today's transmission, as Veltar had promised to share recordings of the Dawn Chorus from Resonance Prime, a daily ritual where the planet's cities would sing together as their star rose. But as she activated the message, her smile faded. The transmission was different, shorter, more urgent. The harmonious tones that usually characterized Zephyrian communication were replaced by rapid, staccato patterns that their translation systems identified as distress signals. Veltar's message was brief and troubling. Harmonic disruption detected. Deep space resonance suggests aggressive frequencies approaching your system. We register patterns consistent with predator song. This is most concerning. We must discuss immediate protective harmonies. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. In all their weeks of communication, the Zephyrians had never mentioned predators or aggressive frequencies. Their entire culture seemed built around cooperation and harmony. What could possibly frighten beings who had mastered interstellar travel and biological engineering? She immediately activated the emergency communication protocol, connecting to Governor Chen's office and the colony's defense coordinator. As she waited for the connection, Elena noticed something that made her blood run cold. The Zephyrian ship's bioluminescent patterns had changed. Instead of the slow, rhythmic pulses that had become as familiar as a heartbeat over the past weeks, the vessel was now strobing with rapid, erratic flashes. The beautiful pearl-like surface seemed to be darkening, and she could swear that the ship's organic curves were shifting, becoming more angular, more defensive. The communication channel crackled to life, Governor Chen's voice tight with concern. "Dr. Vasquez, we're receiving multiple alerts from our deep space sensors. Something's coming in fast on the outer system trajectory. The Zephyrians are requesting immediate conference. They seem genuinely terrified." Elena's mind raced as she processed the implications. First contact with humanity had been peaceful, even joyful. But now it seemed that their new friends had brought them to the attention of something far less benevolent. The galaxy, which had seemed so full of promise, just hours ago suddenly felt very dangerous indeed. As she gathered her materials for what would undoubtedly be the most important meeting of her life, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that their peaceful first contact was about to become something else entirely. The Zephyrians' fear was palpable, even through their bioacoustic transmissions. And if beings capable of interstellar travel and biological mastery were frightened, what did that say about what was coming toward Kepler 442b? The twin suns continued to shine down on New Geneva's crystalline spires, but the light no longer seemed warm and welcoming. Instead, it felt like the calm before a storm that could change everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. The emergency conference room in New Geneva's command center had never hosted anything like this. Governor Chen sat at the head of the polished metal table, his face grim as he reviewed the data streaming in from their deep space sensors. Dr. Vasquez occupied the seat to his right, her tablet displaying real-time translations of increasingly frantic Zephyrian communications. Across from them, Admiral Sarah Rodriguez, the colony's defense coordinator, studied tactical displays with the intensity of someone who had spent 20 years preparing for scenarios that were suddenly becoming reality. But the most remarkable presence in the room wasn't human at all. For the first time since their arrival, Harmonizer Veltar had agreed to enter a human structure. The Zephyrian stood nearly 3 meters tall, his translucent skin pulsing with agitated patterns of bioluminescence that cast shifting shadows. Across the walls, the harmony organs along his cranial ridges were vibrating with subsonic frequencies that made every human in the room feel a deep, instinctive unease. "The predator song grows stronger," Veltar communicated through the translation matrix, his bioacoustic voice carrying undertones of fear that needed no translation. "We recognize the harmonic signature. They are called the Devourers, those who consume harmony and leave only silence. They hunt in packs across the void, drawn to worlds where multiple species create new songs together." Elena leaned forward, her xenobiologist training kicking in despite her growing alarm. "You're saying they're attracted to first contact situations? To peaceful cooperation between species?" Veltar's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep purples and reds, colors the humans had learned indicated profound distress. "Yes, harmony speaker Elena. The Devourers feed on the resonance created when different life songs blend. They consider such cooperation a delicacy. My people have encountered their aftermath on 17 worlds. Cities burned, populations scattered or consumed, the very ability to create harmony stripped from survivors." Admiral Rodriguez's military mind immediately went to tactical considerations. "What kind of technology are we dealing with? Weapons, defenses, fleet size?" "They do not build as you build or grow as we grow," Veltar replied, his harmony organs producing a sound like breaking glass. "The Devourers remake themselves and their vessels from the worlds they consume. Their ships are crafted from the bones of dead civilizations, powered by the stolen life force of extinct species. They are adaptation incarnate." Governor Chen felt his stomach drop. "How long do we have?" Before Veltar could respond, the room's communication system crackled to life. Lieutenant James Park's voice came through, tight with barely controlled panic. "Governor, you need to see this. We've got visual contact with the incoming vessels." The room's main display flickered to life, showing the feed from their most powerful orbital telescope. What they saw defied immediate comprehension. The approaching fleet, if it could be called that, looked like a nightmare fusion of organic growth and mechanical precision. The lead vessel resembled a massive spider carved from blackened bone, its hull studded with what appeared to be the fossilized remains of other ships. Smaller craft swarmed around it like parasites, each one unique in design, but unified by the same grotesque aesthetic of scavenged materials and predatory purpose. "My God," Dr. Vasquez whispered, her scientific curiosity warring with visceral horror. "Those hull patterns, are those actual remains?" Veltar's response sent chills through every human present. The large vessel incorporates elements from the singing crystals of Harmonia Seventh, the bioships of the Reef Builders, and the quantum hulls of the Void Dancers. All species that the Devourers have harvested. Each conquest adds to their strength, their knowledge, their hunger. Admiral Rodriguez was already activating emergency protocols. "Colony defense grid coming online. All civilian populations to move to designated shelter areas. How long until they reach us?" "At their current velocity. 18 hours, Lieutenant Park reported. "But Governor, there's something else. We're detecting massive energy buildups from their vessels. It looks like they're preparing to drop out of FTL right on top of us." The room fell silent except for the ominous humming of Veltar's distressed harmony organs. Finally, Governor Chen spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of impossible decisions. "Veltar, your people have faster-than-light capability. You could escape before they arrive." The aliens' bioluminescent patterns shifted to a color combination the humans had never seen before, brilliant gold mixed with deep blue. Through their cultural exchanges, they had learned that this was the Zephyrian expression for what humans might call noble determination. "We will not abandon our new harmony partners," Veltar replied, his bioacoustic voice carrying new resonances of resolve. "But we must warn you, conventional weapons will have limited effect against the Devourers. They adapt quickly, learning from each attack. However," the alien paused, his harmony organs producing a complex series of tones that the translation system struggled to interpret. "However what?" Elena pressed. "There are stories, harmony legends from the oldest singers of our people, tales of a species that once fought the Devourers to a standstill, a young race that refused to harmonize with others not out of fear, but out of fierce independence. These beings were said to possess what the old songs call discord strength, the ability to fight without rhythm, to strike without pattern, to create chaos where the Devourers expected harmony." Admiral Rodriguez felt a strange stirring of hope. What happened to these beings? Veltar's patterns dimmed. The songs say they vanished into the deep void, seeking something beyond the reach of harmony or discord. But before they left, they scattered seeds of their discord strength across many worlds, hoping other species might learn to fight as they did. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her tablet, where she had been frantically cross-referencing xenoarchaeological databases. "Veltar, these beings you describe, did they call themselves anything in particular?" The Harmony legends named them the Terra Singers, though it was said they despised singing and preferred the sound of their own voices raised in defiance. The human members of the room exchanged glances, a mixture of shock and realization passing between them. Governor Chen was the first to speak. "Veltar, Terra is the ancient name for Earth. You're describing humans." The alien's harmony organs fell completely silent for the first time since entering the room. When he finally responded, his bioacoustic voice carried a note of awe that the translation matrix rendered as whispered reverence. But the Terra Singers of legend were giants among the stars, warriors who could make the void itself tremble. You are peaceful harmony makers, builders of beautiful settlements, creators of touching music. Admiral Rodriguez stood up, her military bearing suddenly more pronounced. Veltar, you've spent 3 weeks getting to know our diplomats, our artists, our peaceful colonists, but you haven't met the other side of humanity. She activated her command interface, connecting to the colony's military database. Elena, show our friend the historical files. All of them. As Dr. Vasquez began uploading humanity's military history to the translation matrix, the wars, the strategies, the terrible innovations born from centuries of conflict, Veltar's bioluminescent, patterns began shifting through colors the humans had never seen before. The alien was experiencing something that his peaceful species rarely encountered, the realization that their new friends were not just harmony makers, but also the most successful predators their world had ever produced. The Discord Singers. Return, Veltar whispered, his harmony organs beginning to produce new sounds, not the melodious tones of peace, but something harder, more martial. Perhaps the old songs spoke truth. Perhaps the harvest time of the Devourers has finally met its end. But even as hope began to kindle in the room, Lieutenant Park's voice crackled through the communication system with news that changed everything. Governor, we're getting a priority transmission from the outer system. It's not from the Devourers. We've got a human ship dropping out of FTL, and it's massive. Configuration unknown, but it's broadcasting Terran military codes. The display shifted to show a new contact, and every human in the room felt their breath catch. The vessel that had just appeared was nothing like the diplomatic ships or colony transports they knew. It was a predator given form, angular, aggressive, bristling with weapon systems that made Admiral Rodriguez's colonial defenses look like toys. And it was heading straight for the Devourer fleet at attack velocity. As they watched in stunned silence, the unknown Terran warship opened a communication channel. The voice that emerged was crisp, professional, and terrifyingly calm. This is Captain Marcus Webb of the UES Retribution. Any hostile vessels in this system have 60 seconds to withdraw or be destroyed. This is your only warning. Veltar's harmony organs produced a sound that needed no translation, the alien equivalent of a war cry. The peaceful first contact was over. Humanity's true nature was about to be revealed, and the galaxy would never be the same. The silence that followed Captain Webb's ultimatum stretched for exactly 37 seconds. Elena watched the chronometer on her tablet, each digital heartbeat feeling like an eternity as 3 different species held their collective breath. Then the Devourer fleet responded, not with words, but with action that spoke volumes about their nature. The lead vessel, that nightmarish spider of bone and stolen technology, suddenly erupted with new appendages. What had appeared to be decorative remains along its hull revealed themselves as weapon systems of impossible complexity. Cannons that seemed to grow from the fossilized corpses of ships, energy projectors that pulsed with the dying light of consumed stars, and most terrifyingly, launch bays that began disgorging smaller craft like a disturbed nest releasing its young. Jesus Christ! Admiral Rodriguez breathed, her military training warring with the sheer alien horror of what she was witnessing. Those aren't just weapons. They're using actual remains as components. Each of those gun systems is built from a different species technology. Veltar's bioluminescent patterns had shifted to pure white, a color the humans had never seen him display before. The harvester ships carry the war songs of the conquered, he translated unnecessarily, his harmony organs producing sounds like grinding metal. Each weapon system knows how its original creators fought. The Devourers do not just consume civilizations, they conscript them into eternal service. The UES Retribution's response was immediate and devastating. The Terran warship unleashed a barrage that defied everything the colonists thought they knew about human military capabilities. Streams of coherent energy that bent space itself, kinetic projectiles that seemed to phase in and out of reality, and something that Elena's instruments couldn't even classify. Bolts of pure force that struck the Devourer formation like the fist of an angry god. But what shocked her more than the weapons was the strategy. Captain Webb wasn't fighting like the methodical formation-based tactics she'd studied in military history. Instead, the Retribution moved with fluid unpredictability, never maintaining the same vector for more than a few seconds, its attack patterns seemingly random yet devastatingly effective. It was exactly what Veltar had described, Discord strength in action. "How is this possible?" Governor Chen demanded, his voice barely audible over the tactical displays that were updating faster than human eyes could follow. "We sent colony, ships, not military dreadnoughts. Where did that thing come from?" Admiral Rodriguez was studying the Retribution's movement patterns with growing amazement and horror. "Sir, I'm analyzing their tactical profile. This isn't standard UEG military doctrine. These are completely new fighting strategies, adaptive, chaotic, designed to be unpredictable, and the weapons—" She paused, her face pale. "Governor, those energy signatures suggest technology that's decades ahead of anything in our colonial databases." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her xenobiology readings with the expression of dawning realization. "What if we've been thinking about this wrong? What if the peaceful colonization program wasn't humanity's only expansion into space? What if there's been a parallel program, a military one, that we never knew about?" Her words hung in the air like a revelation, but before anyone could respond, the communication system crackled to life again. This time it wasn't Lieutenant Park's voice, but Captain Webb himself, his tone as calm as if he were ordering coffee rather than coordinating a battle against nightmare entities. "New Geneva Control, this is Captain Webb. I'm transmitting tactical data to your defense coordinator. The Devourers have a standard attack pattern. They'll test your defenses with expendable units while their primary harvester analyzes your response patterns. Do not engage in coordinated defensive fire. Repeat, avoid all coordinated tactics. They learn from rhythm and pattern." Admiral Rodriguez activated the response channel, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "Captain Webb, this is Admiral Rodriguez. We need to know, what is the UES Retribution? What's your mission here?" Webb's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Admiral, the Retribution is what humanity becomes when we stop pretending we're peaceful explorers. As for our mission, we've been hunting these bastards across half the galaxy. Your first contact with the Zephyrians lit up every sensor array, from here to the outer rim. The Devourers weren't the only ones who noticed. Veltar's harmony organs suddenly produced a complex sequence of tones that the translation matrix identified as profound shock mixed with historical recognition. "Harmony speakers." He addressed the humans, his bioacoustic voice trembling. "We must share something with you immediately. The legends of the Terra Singers. They were not ancient history. Our homeworld's astronomical records show the last confirmed sighting was only 2 of your centuries ago." Elena felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. 200 years? But that would mean, Governor Chen finished grimly, that there have been humans fighting in deep space since before we even established colonies beyond Mars. The implications were staggering, but there was no time to process them fully. The Devourer fleet had finished analyzing the Retribution's initial attack and was adapting with horrifying speed. The smaller craft that had poured from the lead vessel were now moving in formation patterns that mirrored and countered Webb's chaotic tactics. More disturbingly, some of them were beginning to emit energy signatures that matched the Retribution's weapons. "They're learning," Admiral Rodriguez reported, her voice tight with professional concern. "Captain Webb, the enemy is adapting to your attack patterns." Webb's response came back immediately. But now there was something different in his tone. Not fear, exactly, but a kind of grim satisfaction. "Admiral, that's exactly what we wanted them to do. Retribution. Execute Protocol 77. What happened next would be burned into the memory of every human who witnessed it." The UES Retribution suddenly split apart, not destroyed, but deliberately separating into multiple independent sections. Each piece immediately began operating with its own unique tactics, weapons, and movement patterns. The Devourers, who had been adapting to fight one unpredictable enemy, suddenly found themselves facing 7 completely different opponents, each one fighting with its own version of chaotic human warfare. But the real shock came when Elena's sensors detected something impossible. "Governor," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm reading life signs aboard each of those sections. The Retribution isn't just a modular ship. It's carrying multiple crews, each one trained in different combat doctrines. Veltar's bioluminescent patterns had cycled through every color the humans had ever seen him display, and were now producing new combinations that hurt to look at directly. The Discord singers have evolved," he said, his harmony organs creating sounds like breaking crystal mixed with storm winds. "They have learned to fragment their own harmony to create perfect chaos." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The Devourers, masters of adaptation who had consumed hundreds of civilizations, found themselves facing an enemy that refused to be analyzed or predicted. Every time they adapted to one human fighting style, another section of the Retribution would reveal entirely new tactics. The humans weren't just unpredictable, they were systematically unpredictable, turning their own nature as a chaotic, individualistic species into the ultimate weapon. Dr. Torres, the colony's musician who had become friends with Veltar, had been quietly observing the tactical displays. Suddenly, he spoke up, his voice filled with wonder and horror in equal measure. "This is jazz," he said, causing everyone to turn toward him. "Don't you see? Each section of that ship is improvising around the same basic theme, destroy the enemy, but they're doing it in completely different styles. They're not coordinating, they're jamming." Elena stared at the displays with new understanding. Torres was right. The human sections weren't following a battle plan in any conventional sense. They were improvising, responding to each other and the enemy in real time, creating a symphony of destruction that had no sheet music, no conductor, only the shared understanding of the melody they were all playing variations on. But even as the Retribution's tactics proved devastatingly effective against the Devourer scouts, Elena's sensors were detecting something that made her blood run cold. The main harvester ship, the massive spider of bone and stolen technology, hadn't moved from its position at the edge of the system. It was watching, analyzing, learning not just from the human tactics, but from the way the humans learned and adapted in real time. "Captain Webb," she transmitted on the emergency channel, "the primary harvester vessel is still studying your tactics. It's not engaging, it's preparing." Webb's response carried a note of satisfaction that somehow made Elena even more nervous. "Dr. Vasquez, that's exactly what we were hoping for. You see, the Devourers have one fatal flaw. They always assume they're the smartest predator in the room. They've never encountered a species that hunts the hunters." As if summoned by his words, Elena's long-range sensors suddenly detected new contacts dropping out of FTL throughout the system. Not one ship, not 2, but dozens of vessels bearing Terran military signatures. Each one was different, some sleek and fast, others massive and heavily armored, a few that seemed to bend light around themselves in ways that hurt to observe. Directly. Governor Chen's voice was barely a whisper. "My God, how long have they been out here? How long has humanity been fighting a war we never knew existed?" Veltar's harmony organs had fallen completely silent, but his bioluminescent patterns were cycling through what Elena recognized as the Zephyrian equivalent of religious awe. When he finally spoke, His bioacoustic voice carried harmonics that the translation matrix could barely process. "The harvest time ends today," he said, his words carrying the weight of prophecy. "The Terra Singers have returned not as harmony makers, but as the silence that comes after the last song is sung. The Devourers will learn what we should have remembered from the oldest songs. Some species are not meant to be harmonized with. Some species are meant to be the discord that breaks all other music." The main Devourer harvester finally began to move, its massive bulk accelerating toward the center of the system with predatory intent. But it was no longer hunting. For the first time in its species' existence, it had become the prey. What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. It was an execution disguised as a symphony. The moment the Devourer harvester committed to its attack vector, the scattered human fleet began what Captain Webb would later describe in his reports as crescendo protocol, a tactical doctrine that turned the chaos of human nature into a precisely orchestrated devastation. Elena watched in fascination and horror as dozens of Terran warships began moving in patterns that seemed random but were actually responding to each other in ways that transcended traditional military coordination. It was as if each ship's crew was listening to music that only they could hear, improvising their part in a grand composition that existed nowhere except in the collective unconscious of humanity's warrior class. The UES Mongoose, a sleek destroyer that seemed to phase in and out of visible space, began laying down covering fire with weapons that Elena's instruments couldn't even classify. The massive dreadnought Prometheus opened launch bays that disgorged not fighters, but what appeared to be autonomous weapon platforms that immediately began their own chaotic attack patterns. Most disturbing of all was a ship that showed up, on sensors as nothing more than gravitational distortions, the UES Silence, which seemed to be removing pieces of the Devourer harvester simply by existing near them. "This is impossible," Admiral Rodriguez said, her voice filled with professional awe. "They're not following any tactical doctrine I've ever seen. There's no central command, no coordination pattern, no unified strategy. But somehow they're working together more effectively than any fleet formation in human military history." Veltar had been silent for several minutes, his harmony organs producing subsonic frequencies that made the humans feel emotions they had no names for. When he finally spoke, his bioacoustic voice carried harmonics that the translation matrix rendered as something between reverence and terror. "Harmony speakers, we have been naive. We believed the Terra Singer legends spoke of ancient history, but we understand now that we were witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. Your species has not just survived first contact with the Devourers, you have evolved to become something that hunts them." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her readings with the expression of dawning comprehension. "Veltar, how long have the Devourers been active in this galaxy?" "The harmony songs record their presence for over 50,000 of your years," the alien replied, his bioluminescent patterns shifting to deep, ancient colors. "They have consumed over 3,000 civilizations. Until today, no species had ever successfully fought them to anything but mutual destruction." Elena felt as if reality was reshaping itself around her. "Captain Webb," she transmitted to the Retribution's command crew, "Dr. Vasquez here. We need to understand, what exactly are you? How long has humanity been preparing for this?" Webb's response came back immediately, but this time his voice carried something Elena hadn't heard before, a kind of weary sadness that spoke of years spent in the cold dark between stars. "Dr. Vasquez, the truth is that humanity has been at war for the past 2 centuries, not with each other, not anymore. We learned to save that for when it matters. We've been fighting things that make the Devourers look like annoying insects. The words hung in the air like a revelation that changed everything. Governor Chen activated his communication interface with hands that trembled slightly. Captain Webb, what do you mean by things that make the Devourers look like insects? Before Webb could respond, the Devourer Harvester revealed why it had been called a harvester. The massive vessel suddenly began unfolding. What the humans had taken for a ship revealed itself as something far more horrifying, a mobile ecosystem designed to process entire worlds. Organic factories began extruding from its hull, biomechanical systems that could strip mine planets and convert their resources into more devourer vessels. Most terrifyingly, the ship began broadcasting psychic frequencies designed to paralyze its prey with existential despair. Elena felt the wave of psychic assault wash over the colony. A telepathic scream that whispered of the futility of resistance, the inevitability of consumption, the meaninglessness of individual existence in the face of cosmic predators. She watched in horror as some of the younger colonists began to collapse, their minds overwhelmed by the artificial despair. But then something extraordinary happened. Veltar's harmony organs suddenly erupted with sound. Not the melodious tones of Zephyrian communication, but something harsh and discordant that hurt to hear. The alien was screaming, but his scream was somehow fighting back against the Devourer's psychic assault. "Veltar, what are you doing?" Elena shouted over the cacophony. "Learning," the Zephyrian replied, his bioacoustic voice distorting in ways that suggested his vocal systems were being pushed beyond their design limits. "Learning to sing discord, to create harmony from chaos, to fight as the Terra Singers fight. The Devourers use despair as a weapon, but despair can only exist in the presence of hope. We choose to hope loudly." But it was the human fleet's response to the psychic attack that truly demonstrated why they had become the galaxy's apex predators. Instead of being paralyzed by despair, the crews seemed to become more energetic, more chaotic, more effective. Elena realized with shock that they were using the Devourer's psychic assault as fuel, converting existential dread into tactical fury. Captain Webb's voice came across the communication channel, and now he sounded almost cheerful. "You want to know the real secret of human military doctrine? We discovered that the universe is trying to kill us from the moment we're born. Disease, disaster, death, entropy, everything is against us. So we learned to take that knowledge and turn it into strength. The Devourers think they can make us despair. Hell, we've been living with cosmic despair since we first looked up at the stars and realized how small we are." The final phase of the battle was less a military engagement than a demonstration of what happened when an unstoppable force met an infinitely adaptable object. The Devourer Harvester, designed to consume civilizations that fought with logic and coordination, found itself facing an enemy that treated logic as a suggestion and coordination as a form of art rather than science. The human ships began executing what could only be called impossible maneuvers. The destroyer Mongoose actually folded space around itself to attack from multiple angles simultaneously, while the dreadnought Prometheus began using its own hull as a kinetic weapon, ramming Devourer constructs at velocities that should have destroyed both vessels. Most spectacularly, the UES Silence simply made the Harvester's primary weapon system cease to exist, not by destroying them, but by convincing local reality that they had never been there in the first place. Elena watched the tactical displays, with the fascination of a scientist observing something that challenged every assumption she had ever held about physics, biology, and the nature of existence itself. "Captain Webb," she transmitted, "those maneuvers are impossible. How are your ships surviving impacts that should vaporize them?" Webb's laugh was warm and genuinely amused. "Dr. Vasquez, you're thinking like a scientist. That's your first mistake. We learned a long time ago that the universe runs on quantum uncertainty and statistical probability. If you believe hard enough and move fast enough, sometimes reality forgets what's supposed to be impossible." The end came, Not with a massive explosion, but with something far more unsettling. The Devourer Harvester simply stopped. It's organic. Factories ceased production. Its psychic broadcasts fell silent. Its weapon systems powered down. For a moment, Elena thought it had been destroyed, but her sensors still showed massive life signs throughout the vessel. Then Captain Webb transmitted one final message that explained everything. Dr. Vasquez, Governor Chen, Admiral Rodriguez, the Harvester isn't dead. It's surrendered. You see, the Devourers have one trait that made them successful for 50,000 years and vulnerable today. They're intelligent. They learn. And what they've learned from fighting humanity is that some prey isn't worth catching. Veltars. Harmony organs had fallen silent, but his bioluminescent patterns were cycling through colors that Elena had never seen before. Brilliant combinations that seemed to represent concepts for which no species had yet invented words. When he finally spoke, his voice carried harmonics of wonder that needed no translation. The harvest time ends not with the silence of death, but with the choice of life, he said, his words carrying the weight of prophecy. The Devourers have learned what the Terra Singers always knew, that survival is not about being the strongest or the most intelligent. It is about being too chaotic to predict, too adaptable to counter, and too stubborn to give up. As the human fleet began forming up around the surrendered Harvester, Elena finally understood the true scope of what she had witnessed. Humanity hadn't just won a battle. They had fundamentally changed the nature of predation in the galaxy. They had turned the hunters into the hunted not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but by being so utterly, incomprehensibly human that even cosmic predators decided they were too much trouble to eat. Governor Chen's voice carried a mixture of pride and horror as he addressed the room. So the peaceful first contact we thought we were having was actually just the opening movement of a symphony that's been playing for 2 centuries. The question is, what comes next? Captain Webb's final transmission provided the answer. What comes next, Governor, is that we go home. All of us, the Devourers, will spread the word that humanity is not to be harvested. The galaxy just got a lot safer for peaceful species. And as for the colony ship Melody and your cultural exchange program, well, it looks like you're going to have a lot more friends to visit than you originally planned. As Elena watched the twin suns of Kepler 442b set over New Geneva's crystalline spires, she realized that first contact had indeed been peaceful. It was everything that came after, the revelation of humanity's true nature, the demonstration of their capacity for beautiful chaos, and the galaxy's subsequent decision to leave them alone. That had been war. And somehow, impossibly, it had been the most human victory in the history of warfare. They had won by being so utterly themselves that their enemies had simply chosen to find easier prey. The age of humanity as a galactic power had begun, not with conquest, but with the cosmic equivalent of a predator looking at a porcupine and deciding that dinner wasn't worth the trouble.